In 1996, a gorilla named Binti Jua caught a 3-year-old boy who fell 18 feet into her enclosure. She could have ignored him. She could have reacted the way fear usually makes a wild animal react. Instead, she cradled him in her arms and carried him straight to the door where the keepers were waiting. But what you are about to discover is far stranger and far more personal, because this was not an isolated moment. Across the animal kingdom, there are documented cases of wild creatures choosing to shield a human from real danger, sometimes at real cost to themselves. And once you understand why, you will never look at an animal's gaze the same way again. Your instinct says this should not happen. Wild animals are supposed to be indifferent to you, at best. At worst, you are prey, or a threat to be avoided. So why would a gorilla, a dolphin, or even a wolf step between you and something that wanted to hurt you? Here is the part that changes everything. Empathy did not evolve because it feels good. It evolved because, in a group-living species, a member that reads distress in others and responds to it keeps the group alive longer. A dolphin that senses a wounded swimmer is not being sentimental. It is running an ancient, tested program that was written into a wild animal's ancestors long before your ancestors ever stood upright. The answer starts with a part of the brain you share with almost every mammal on Earth. It is called the limbic system. Decode that term, and it simply means the emotional control center of the brain, the part responsible for fear, bonding, and recognizing distress in another creature. Humans have one. Dolphins have one. Elephants, wolves, and gorillas all have one too. And it does not simply switch off when a different species is in trouble. Researchers like Frans de Waal spent decades studying empathy in primates. His work showed something uncomfortable for a lot of people to accept. Empathy is not a uniquely human invention. It is an old survival tool, older than language, older than tools, older than fire. So when that same wiring picks up your fear, your distress call, your vulnerability, it does not always check your species first. It just responds. There is a chemical piece to this too. Oxytocin, the hormone linked to bonding and trust, rises in humans when we connect with someone we care about. Studies on dogs found the same hormone rises in them during eye contact with a human, and it rises in the human at the same time. The same molecule, doing the same job, in two different species looking at each other. That is not a metaphor. That is measurable biology. But that is not even the strangest part. Elephants have been documented forming a protective circle around injured humans, the same formation they use to shield a wounded elephant calf from a threat. Wolves, in some indigenous oral histories, are described guiding lost children back towards safety. And in 2004, off the coast of New Zealand, a pod of dolphins encircled 4 swimmers for 40 minutes, tightening the circle every time a great white shark approached, until the shark finally gave up and swam away. None of those dolphins had ever met those swimmers before. None of them owed anything to a human. And yet, for 40 minutes, they treated 4 strangers exactly the way they would treat a member of their own pod, facing a threat in open water. If you have made it this far, something in this story is already sitting with you. That is worth a subscribe, because there is more of this waiting every week. What makes this even more remarkable is what it is not. It is not obedience. It is not training. None of these animals were taught to do this. There was no reward waiting for the gorilla, the elephants, or the dolphins. There was only a signal, read correctly, and a response that came from somewhere deep and automatic. Scientists call this behavior interspecies altruism, and for a long time it was dismissed as anecdotal, too rare, and too emotional to study seriously. That changed once researchers began tracking it across enough documented cases to see a pattern. The pattern is this. The animals most likely to protect a human are the same animals with the most complex social bonds within their own species. Elephants mourn their dead and remember individuals for decades. Dolphins call each other by name using signature whistles. Gorillas form deep multi-year family bonds. The very same wiring that makes a species deeply loyal to its own group is the wiring that occasionally reaches out and includes you, and this is where it gets harder to look away. Some researchers believe there is a second layer underneath the empathy explanation, something closer to recognition. Certain animals appear able to read human facial expressions and body language with startling accuracy. sometimes better than we read each other. A dog can tell the difference between your genuine smile and a forced one. Elephants can recognize human voices as male, female, or child, and react with more caution to voices associated with historical threats to their herds, showing they are not just responding to a species, they are responding to a specific pattern of danger they have learned to recognize. If an elephant can learn to distinguish a threatening human voice from a safe one, it stands to reason the same intelligence can recognize genuine distress and respond to it, the same way it would respond to distress inside its own herd. Think about what that means. These are not simple reflexes, they are judgment calls, made in seconds, by a mind capable of telling the difference between a human who means harm and a human who needs help. There is another case worth knowing. In 2017, marine biologist Nan Hauser was diving near the Cook Islands when a 50,000-pound humpback whale suddenly pushed her through the water with its head and tucked her under its fin. She had no idea why, until she surfaced and saw a tiger shark circling nearby. The whale had positioned its own body between her and the shark for over 10 minutes before finally letting her go. Hauser had spent almost 30 years studying whales. She said she had never experienced anything like it, and she still cannot fully explain why that whale chose to do what it did. Not every case ends the way you would hope. Some animals that stepped in to shield a human were wounded doing it. A few did not survive the encounter. That cost is part of the story too, because it shows this was never a casual gesture. It was a real decision, made with real risk, by a creature that had nothing to gain from making it. Which brings up the question underneath all of this. If a wild animal, with no language, no promise of reward, and no obligation to you, can look at your fear and choose to stand between you and danger, what does that say about the line we draw between them and us? For most of human history, that line was drawn sharply. Animals reacted. Humans felt. Animals followed instinct. Humans made choices. But every documented case like Binti Jua, like that pod of dolphins circling 4 strangers off the coast of New Zealand, quietly erodes that line a little more. Maybe the truth is simpler and stranger than either extreme. Maybe emotion was never a purely human invention we generously extended to animals when it was convenient. Maybe it was always shared, running underneath every species that had to survive by staying close to others, humans included. That would mean every time you have felt a strange, wordless connection with an animal, a dog resting its head on you during a hard week, a horse that seemed to know you needed calm before you did, that connection was not your imagination. It was 2 nervous systems, built from the same ancient blueprint, recognizing each other. It also reframes what protection really means. You tend to think of it as something owed, something earned through loyalty or years of care. But Binti Jua owed that toddler nothing. The dolphins off New Zealand owed those swimmers nothing. The whale near the Cook Islands owed Nan Hauser nothing. In every one of these cases, the animal had every biological reason to prioritize its own safety first and chose the harder option instead. That is not instinct working on autopilot. That is something closer to a choice. You began this video learning about a gorilla who caught a falling child. You end it learning that she was not the exception. She was proof of something far older than either of you. A thread of recognition that runs quietly through nearly every social species on this planet, waiting for the right moment to surface. If you have ever felt something like this with an animal of your own, leave a comment and tell that story. And if this changed the way you see the space between species, a like helps this reach someone who needs to feel it too. Thank you for watching.